Welcome again, folks. This is Donald Kent at American Zarathustra. I have a really wonderful special feature today. We have invited on our friend, author Jim Bonner, who is a really huge, talented, brilliant man in our sphere. And he's going to be talking about his new book, which is on Amazon currently. It's called Compendious Visions, Discourses on Contemporary Decline. You can get that book both in Kindle and paperback. Paperback's $9.99. So we super strongly recommend that. And let me quickly introduce my co-host and good friend for today, Nellis. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Hello, Donald. And it's been a long time since we had an episode of Imperium Art, so it's great to be back. And hello, Jim, and hello to the audience.
Mm-hmm. And there it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the great Jim Bonner. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be back again. Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
I feel like I should have you on more often, as people of your caliber are far and few between. So we're quite happy. But let's first introduce the audience to you, your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you can, and then also some other books that you've published or works you've published.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm a father, a husband, author on the side. It's kind of like Batman on the side. That's what I do. But in my day job, I'm a statistical analyst.
So you're not vengeance, is what you're saying. You're not vengeance.
No, but I am darkness, and I was
good. Okay, aren't we all? Aren't we all in our way? All right.
I have a few other published works. My play Interbellum, which I think that we've talked about before. In fact, you guys interviewed me originally for the White Art Collective about it.
Well, it's one of the earliest Imperium Art episodes, honestly. So Interbellum is a play that you wrote. Could you quickly describe that play?
Sure, yeah. It takes place in Italy 30 years after the Trojan War, between Aeneas and Diomedes, who, if you're familiar with the Trojan cycle, those are two of the main characters, and they wind up confronting each other again in Italy. And it has everything to do with our current situation and crises of identity and what to do with the past.
Wow, what to do with the past? What a kind of beautiful and profound question. And Nellis, did you have a chance to read that play? I don't know if you had.
Oh, yes, and we covered it also in Conversations with the Wind as well.
Fabulous. Can you comment a little bit?
Well, it's been a while, but what I can say is buy the book.
Just get down to brass tacks, folks, okay? This is going to be a crude commercial for the rest of the
Buy the books.
Buy the book. Subliminal messages. Sorry, I couldn't buy and get.
No, it was a great play. I'm sorry to be crude about that, but no, it was a great play. I strongly recommend it to everyone. It's a very compelling story. I do not want to go into too much detail because I want everyone to buy the book.
All right. So let's talk about the new book that you've got out here, Jim. Compendious Visions, Discourses on Contemporary Decline. First of all, can you explain that title and kind of break it down a little bit?
Sure thing, yeah. So Compendious Visions, the subtitle Discourses on Contemporary Decline it explains what the visions are that are compendious. So compendious is basically defined as a summarized totality. So it's not anything that's in depth. It's not something that's going to be 6 volumes long. It's just the essentials, but it is all of the essentials that you need. And then visions is a perception of conception. So it's concepts that you can perceive. So compendious visions, by that I mean that the book discloses a wide swath of information that I've found necessary to fully inform people entering our sphere and to sort of create a non-dogmatic orthodoxy for everyone already here. So I kind of wanted to establish a useful baseline from which we can actualize our beliefs.
Powerful.
So the visions part of the title is how I lay out the necessary awareness, which is in three main parts of the book or visions, kind of what was, what is now, and what could be in the future, what we should try to achieve.
Beautiful. So that actually aligns really beautifully with the intent of Imperium art. Um, that's quite a big chunk of information to approach too, and I'm really it's impressive. I kind of want to first start off with what were your resources? What were you know how do you build your case and this total summary on sort of what literary or newsworthy sources were you using to accumulate all this knowledge?
Um, so the sources, well, so the whole point originally was it kind of started as like a manifesto.
Mm,
So
okay.
I was just kind of getting onto paper what I was thinking and feeling, and then
Mhm.
justifying it after the fact.
I see.
Um, so a lot of it was just being as upfront as possible and trying to rationalize myself through what I was kind of thinking. I wanted to get it on paper because when I did that, it helped me take out the bad ideas, take out the clutter. And, there was one day where I took all these little notes that I would make on my phone throughout the day,
Yeah.
just like make a note and then forget about it. And so I printed them all off, cut them out, and sort of organized them. And then from there, I would say, okay, well, I remember that from, Rene Guénon, or I remember that from whatever, like a Joel Davis thing that I saw, and then I would
Mhm.
cite it
Yeah.
like that. But a lot of the notes were just things that had been ruminating for a long time.
Okay. So what really compelled you to do this? I mean, I'm sure there's many reasons, and we're all feeling a lot of that, and there's a need for leadership. We're all contemplating, the future. We're debating the past. That's this, that, and the other thing. But I'm really pleased to see that you took your talents and approached these questions and then published it. So, but I'd like to hear your personal reasoning and inspiration for writing this piece.
So some of it, like I said, some of it was personal. Some of it I just had no choice because if I didn't do it, I was going to go crazy just
Right.
with these ideas in me. And so I needed to put them down so I could scrutinize them myself. But but the,
Mm-hmm.
the impetus for actually publishing it was that I felt it was necessary to get like I said, a baseline understanding for our sphere of things, something that could be built on, and to especially try to. This is kind of deeper into the text, but to try to activate something, and for people who have the innate ability to activate something in them that could make them in the society to come, the elites, to try to prepare them for what's to come. Because in the introduction to the book, I state that a lot of the ideas and concepts and things that we take for granted now, there's a very good chance that they could become lost within the next decade.
Hmm.
And it's not even something like a solar flare or anything like that. It could just simply be that people don't care
Right.
anymore. And so to get them into one spot, to me, was doing, this sort of like apocalyptic duty, that we needed to
Wow.
get it all in one spot. So
Wow.
that way, if it becomes necessary to utilize this, then we have it ahead of time, and
Okay.
the society to come can build off that.
Hmm. Nolis, do you want to respond at all?
Yeah, there's actually two points I wanted to make. In his most recent stream, Gio was talking about how negativity permeates the discourse in our
Right.
spheres, in these
Powerful.
various spheres,
Powerful.
and how it's very easy for us to approach things from a negative as opposed to approaching things from a positive.
Sure.
So, in this compendium, have you encountered this problematic, and how have you addressed it?
So there's so the first vision that I talked about is kind of like setting the stage of ontology and history, and then the second vision is all about the stuff that we face now. So there's definitely cases where I get a little black pilly, but I don't. That's not the end goal to me. That's the 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 sort of, I guess you'd say, like the depression of our situation right now is not the end. It's just something that we have to get through to better understand what we have to do.
Mhm.
And so before I talk about in the book, before I get into the third part, which is what I envision is to come, I have this intermission where I talk about, okay, there's this tendency to become very depressed about our human nature, the proclivities of our human nature, and the so-called, mistakes of the past, and everything that we face now. I don't have to go into any detail. Everyone knows the
Sure.
depressing aspects of day-to-day life
Right.
in the society that we're in. But there's a tendency to do this, but it's not the end. Like it's not what is, there's still a third part to everything, and it's what's to come. And as long as you're willing to act in an appropriate manner towards a vision of what's to come, then there's absolutely no reason to get depressed. And I think one reason people get depressed is that all that they know is online. And so
Right.
if they got offline, I think a lot of that would go away.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
an interesting point. Yeah.
Maybe a follow-up question to that would be: do you believe in the current climate? So the way I understand it, and I agree with this point, that we have to acknowledge all the negativity around us. We shouldn't let it dominate our mood, our message, or our creativity, or our resolve. But we should recognize that there is a lot of negativity around us. Now, the follow-up question would be then: do you believe that we have to force our way through it, through the fire, if you will? Or is it something that we should just discard, ignore, and just go our own path?
Well, I think even if you wanted to, I don't think you could ignore it. I mean, it's so deliberately in your face every
Right.
day. I don't think it's possible to ignore it.
Right.
But I don't, I do think it needs to be understood, which is one of the reasons for this book. You do have to understand history. You do have to understand what we face now if you're going to make any headway on, forging a new path. You have to understand which path is going to lead to a swamp or a lion's den if you're going to be able to make it to the top of the mountain.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you if you could actually read the title of each chapter to give the audience a look under the hood a little bit and give us some kind of path or direction in this conversation. So I don't know. You sent me a copy and I can't find it. So the bad timing and unprofessional. But if you could maybe walk us through the different chapters and just by title, and then maybe give a brief overview, and we can kind of discuss it casually.
Sure. Yeah, I got the book in front of me, so I'm going to have to flip through it a little bit because I don't have the actual titles of the chapters in the chapter summary at the start of the book because I didn't want it to spoil anything for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the introduction where I talk about the point of the book. And then after that is part 1, which is the first vision of the past and all of our human nature and everything. Chapter 1 regarding reality itself and the linguistic mechanisms used to convey it. Chapter 2 regarding the nature of humanity and its anthropological behavior. Chapter 3 regarding the foundations of civilization and the intellectual requirements necessary for its promulgation, specifically with the advent of Western civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a whole paragraph sometimes. Chapter 4 regarding a cursory political and philosophical understanding of Western civilization's history as it morphed into the modern world. After which we come to part 2, which is a dissection of that modern world. Chapter 5 regarding industrialization and machinery. Chapter 6 regarding capitalism and consumerism. Chapter 7 regarding democracy and politics. And to me, these are all things that are getting in the way of us uncovering and understanding the truth. Chapter 8. Did I skip chapter 7? Or was it chapter 6?
7. You didn't do 7.
Okay. Chapter 7 was democracy. Chapter 8 was regarding media, the internet, and their roles in information dissemination.
Mhm.
Chapter 9, regarding the suburban environment, the automobiles that facilitate it, and what it produces. Chapter 10, regarding relationships between the sexes and pornography's effect on them.
Mhm.
Chapter 11, regarding racial differences and the delegitimization of Europeans for the benefit of other racial groups.
Mhm.
Chapter 12, regarding immigration and its effect on native peoples.
Mhm.
Chapter 13, a brief summary of modern phenomenon as applied to the family. So that's kind of like, okay, everything that we covered in this part of the book, we're gonna look at it within the context of how it affects the family, and of course it's
Sure.
all negative.
Absolutely.
Then chapter 14, so this is how we close off the second part to the book, is regarding the character and history of our current elite and their motives in bringing about the modern world. So that deals with some very taboo subjects, as I'm sure
Oh,
you
yeah.
can intuit.
Oh, yeah.
After which comes the interlude, where it starts off by saying there's an especially troubling kind of cynicism that has the potential to emerge when confronted with the perceived limitations or proclivities of reality and human nature, the missteps of history, and the decried hopelessness of the world we presently inhabit. By all measures, particularly when viewed from conditions of the past, we live in a dystopia. But the rest of that interlude goes on to say, okay, true, but we're going into the part 3, which is
Okay.
about synthesizing the prior observations to optimally set our course. So chapter 15 is regarding the relationship between morality, beauty, and freedom.
Wow. I like that one.
That one was especially fun because as I wrote it, I realized so many things that I hadn't even thought about before. So it was really, that was like very, very like metanoic for me. It was really enjoyable. So chapter 16, after which, a brief regard for the beauty of white people of European descent. Chapter 17, regarding what is needed to preserve and promulgate European beauty, a perspective of potentializing mastery.
Mhm.
Chapter 18, regarding practical implementation of the vision and dissuading detrimental strategies.
Mhm.
And it's all practical. It's all very like, okay, this is why, kamikaze won't work for us. This is why waiting for a collapse won't work for us. That sort of
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
Chapter 19. This is the last actual chapter of the main text. Chapter 19, regarding closing thoughts.
Hmm.
And then there is a fourth part, but it's all appendices. So
Okay.
one of the only appendices that really matters that we'll probably talk about here is Appendix B, where I basically just LARP and make an entirely new constitution for the society to come.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So maybe we should just jump right into that. Could you read that? I mean, how long is it?
It's the Constitution. Well, it reads so it
We
reads
don't have
like,
to read the whole thing, but if you could summarize it, I should say.
so the Constitution itself reads like you're programming a database or something like that, because it's all like
Yeah.
1 subset 1 A subset I subset B,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So
I get
so let me read the quote unquote preamble. It says, any constitution cannot be implemented. Any constitution cannot be implemented at any time or by any people. It is purely hypothetical and contingent on contemporary circumstances.
Mhm.
There would always be a historical milieu that would require certain responses, which the proposed constitution is incapable of accounting for. My objective was to imagine a political system without foregone conclusions, which must be complied to and maintained. To imagine something that can adapt to externalities, not account for them all. It is
Mm.
not an administration system beleaguered with protocol, which will not survive serious tests to its
Right.
procedural traditions, but a means of producing a healthy and free people.
Mhm.
And so, to me, the main points that are covered in the Constitution is that, 1, we have to be able to create a people that is, ethnically homogenous. That's from the get go, and there's, that's like an entire part of the Constitution, is not how to achieve that, but how to maintain that.
Mhm.
But along with that, it's not, to me, it's not just enough to have a nation of white people. There's a lot of people in our sphere who think they just want to go back like to the 1950s or even before the world wars to like the 1910s. But to me, that's not enough, because
Hmm.
it's still partaking in these systems that ultimately led to our current situation.
Mm.
So I believe that there needs to be, sort of Starship Troopers esque, but not really. There needs to be some sort of earned citizenship.
Mm.
It's not something that is birthright,
Mm.
and
Wow. So it's
everyone who. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
a little more like Sparta is what it sounds like.
A little bit, yeah, yeah, a
Mhm.
little bit. Maybe not as hardcore, but yes.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
But so there'd be tiers to being a people in the nation, but along with that, there's also an entirely different political structure. It's not like we just keep the representative democracy. To me, I envision a king of sorts, or at least some sort of
Okay.
uh, central authoritative person where all authority emanates from them. But to me, it's not hereditary, and it's not something that's voted on. They're appointed by their previous. I call it the Archon. So the Archon appoints the following Archon, and that's how
What's the
that's how
origin of
the
this word archon? Like, because I've heard that word in other contexts, and it's not a positive meaning. So I'm trying to understand what do you mean by an archon?
well, and so the arc. I'm sure you understand it from the Gnostic point of view, which is not
Absolutely.
positive
It's
whatsoever.
basically demons. Yeah.
Yeah,
But go
it's the exact opposite of the aeons, but yeah, and so the Archon. I just read the word. I forget where it was. Some sort of like um municipal role in
on. I see.
um Athens, and so I thought, well, that word sounds good, and I didn't want to say monarch because
Hmm.
of all the connotations associated with that. So I
Yeah.
thought, okay,
Yeah.
well, this is similar, but
Sort of forward moving in your conception of a monarch, I suppose. Maybe.
yes, sir. Yeah, yeah, like the five good emperors of Rome, the way that
Mm.
they moved authority from one generation to the next.
So the political system, what does it closely resemble in terms of other ideologies that we're aware of?
Um,
Is it based
so
on any other political systems that exist that we know?
I'm sure that some aspects of it are. I wanted to make it. So my big thing is history. Like I have a degree in history, and I have also a degree in political science. And there were all these things I was thinking of when I was in school
Mm,
that I was like, okay, well, wouldn't this be cool if there was a way to balance the locality
mm,
with the central authority, like local level with central level. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a way to keep authority within one person, but it not be so like rigid like it was in a monarchy? So
yeah.
I was trying to balance all these different um, things that have gone quote unquote wrong with other political systems,
Mm,
and that was my main thing. So if I'm going to compare it to anything that's historical or contemporary, it may be like some sort of weird mix between Sparta and like the Chinese Communist Party's way of centralized democracy, something similar to that. I mean, like if you could merge those, if it's even possible to, that's probably what
mhm,
I'd say.
fascinating. Nellis, did you want to pop in at all?
Yeah, there's quite a bit going on here. I think
Yeah.
that it's an important thing. I'm just trying to think as I'm listening to this. I'm trying to think of various European traditions. The Hungarian tradition has its own tradition as far as how the various tribes that were originally a part of the Magyar uh, nation uh, got together, how they set laws, how they decided on who rules, and all of these things are coming to mind. How they did it in Germany, how they did it during Charlemagne or before Charlemagne. So all of these different things are coming to mind. And I think that what we need to do, or if you go back even to ancient Rome and ancient Greece, also even in Greece, in the various city states, you had different methodologies. They had democratic processes in some city states, but not all, and they weren't really full democracies. There were various qualifications. You had to be a landowner. You had to have you had to meet certain base requirements for you to have the right to vote. So a lot of these things are coming to mind. And I think that what we should do is draw upon all of these experiences. And I think that's really where you're getting at, if I understand this correctly, Jim. Is that right?
Yeah, more or less, yes. I wanted to try to merge all of the aspects that I felt best covered externalities. So it's not really a living document per se. It's just trying to set up a system that is going to be able to preserve its people as best as possible, and that's even from themselves to a certain extent.
Right, and we also have to. I'm sorry to interrupt, Don, but we have to, Donald. But we have to say also that a constitution is not necessarily a liberal idea. We need to make that very clear. A constitution has been around. It's a pact basically that work, and so we have to understand that as a pact, whether that's a blood oath, whether that's a where the representatives of the various groups meet and then they elect leadership. Whether that's a democratic process through very selective means or requirements, all of these things, existed long before liberalism kind of took the constitutional concept and then, like everything else, twisted it around into something that met their needs as opposed to the needs of the organic reality that we live in.
I like how this is directly opposed to Marxism in the sense that, the concept of equity, give everybody the same stuff, make everybody the same, destroy identity in a sense, in that you would have to earn your citizenship. I feel that changes the whole paradigm, because the way Americans are specifically is I feel like we're all sitting in a big movie theater and we just want more popcorn and more soda, and we're just like, and meanwhile the theater is burning down around us and nobody feels a sense that, well, what can I do about it? I'm just trying to pay my taxes, which is actually paying for the fuel that's burning the house down. But anyway, that's a really, really different shift. And I've thought of these kinds of things. I think about these things all the time. And I'm always trying to unlock the problem of how do you get people to kind of like snap out of it and get off the couch, or whatever, and get engaged culturally and politically, especially in this crazy environment. It's because I think that's the biggest black pill of all, is seeing how it's like the perfect storm where you have the left is grinding towards total destruction and the right is not doing anything about it. When I say the right, I mean more like Republicans, normie Republicans,
Right.
And they don't seem they're either colluding with the left or they're just useless garbage, like shills for money or something.
Donald, actually, one of the comments, Nemo brought up something interesting, and what he's saying is actually, well, he's countering the whole point of the Constitution issue, which, it's a valid argument that he's making. But it does bring up an important point. So what he said here, I'll just read the quote. He goes, 100% wrong. The Constitution is a list of freedoms the government cannot violate. It has nothing to do with race. The Constitution is a living document. He goes, this guy's living in the past. Now, let's break this down a little bit and not look at it overly critically and try to understand where this point is being made. Because in the post-Enlightenment era that we're living in today, this postmodern era, but it all started with the Enlightenment. The whole crux of the narrative was about the rights of man. And so
correct.
What are our rights? And so the U.S. Constitution is correct. So what Nemo is saying is technically accurate in terms of its understanding in this current context. And I would say that by not necessarily that you're living in the past, you're drawing from the past to try to understand how to contextualize the future. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, yes. That's correct. But it also, with Nemo's comment, it is based in the post-Enlightenment understanding of rights or freedoms. But if that one chapter that I talked about just a second ago, chapter 15, I don't believe that freedom is able to be politically apportioned or anything like that. Freedom is a spiritual prerogative.
Yeah.
Because to me, it stems from our predatory, like our pack predator human nature. It's not, you don't really see freedom among any sort of like herd animal. It's all pack predators that exhibit traits of freedom. So like there's this one part in the book where I say freedom cannot exist without strength to assert itself. Strength cannot exist without trained morality, which is virtue. A sense of morality cannot exist without an authority beyond human whim. So it therefore relies on spirituality, and therefore freedom is a spiritual prerogative. So I don't ascribe to any sort of theory that would say that politics can secure freedoms or that that's its job.
May I jump in?
Yeah.
So this again, I just want to point out, it aligns beautifully with the Imperium Art Project. If everybody goes back and looks at the 55 episodes we have with the great minds in the far right in our sphere in the white positive movement, you're going to find billions of ideas and lots of incredible content that creates the groundwork for our spirituality, if you want to call it that, like the spirituality of race, if in some regard that we're talking about. And I say that within the context of Jim's previous point there, and how it's a sequence of these things in terms of rebuilding the West, in a new way in which we can preserve our people, because our systems are corruptible. Obviously, like democracy is a joke. It's dead as far as I'm concerned.
Well, democracy itself is really a methodology. That's the way I would approach it. I would say that you can have a democratic process. It's the question is the question for me always is who has the right to vote, and it then also comes down to the question, because even if you had, let's say, a tribal alliance, or you had some kind of blood oath, or if you had even some kind of very simple social contract, you still would have, unless you have an absolute ruler, which only happened post-Enlightenment or in the ancient times when you had temporary tyrants, or maybe during the Roman Empire. But suffice it to say, there's a very strong tradition of voting and electing rulers and making decisions. Now, obviously, to greater or lesser degree. The point I'm trying to make is more when you look at the understanding of rights, where it starts, and maybe this is really what I wanted to get out, Jim, was when you combine the right of man with the individuality of man, then you're opening a Pandora's box, essentially, because you're never going to be able to fulfill every individual right. It's just impossible. And what are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. And I believe I believe the first time I had ever heard anything like that was in this book, Anthropomorphics, by I believe it was Denis Bouvard. It was published by Imperium Press, but he basically says the same thing, where you can't have, like, you can't have these two conflicting ideas, and it's not even like a double think sort of thing. It's everyone's equal, and everyone's also an individual with their own rights. It's going to cause an inherent conflict in the system that's just going to exacerbate any sort of other differences that pre-existed, that were biological or whatever. It's just going to exacerbate those by applying this ideological difference on top of everyone.
Yeah.
So it's just, like you said, it's a Pandora's box. It's just
right.
It's and it's unnecessary too. It's completely ideological, and it's not inherent to any sort of social. I'm not going to say social contract, but it's not inherent to any sort of social framework whatsoever. It's just contemporary.
So since we're on this track, what is the answer? What is your answer for our future? If you could, I know you wrote a whole book on it, but like, if you can kind of get down to sort of the bones of it, and then we can maybe spread out from there.
You mean on like what we're going to face, or what we should be striving for?
Your final, the methodology of surviving the future.
Okay. So I believe that there is going to be some sort of political decentralization. This is not going to be a collapse like what, all the preppers say, although you should be prepping. It's not going to be a collapse like that. It's where, all of a sudden one day the power grid shuts off or something like that. It's going to be a very gradual thing. But what you're going to see over time, and there are historical parallels to our situation, whether it's in the Warring States period of China, or the Second Intermediate period in Egyptian history, or after the fall of Rome, there's going to be political decentralization where the central authority in the US, that's the federal government, the central authority is not going to be able to exert itself everywhere because of a lack of resources and um, a lack of legitimacy, I guess you'd say, where people don't actually want to work for it unless they're able to be given goods. So to me, the answer and what's going to happen is going to be localities begin asserting themselves. And by locality, I just mean like it could be like a small town or a county, or, to a certain extent, in the US, a state. But there's going to be not central authorities, and there's going to be a lot of them. Like I see, especially being someone from Texas, I see once the authority of the federal government begins to wane more than it already has, but when it's not able to allocate resources to defend its interests, you're going to see the cartels just flood over the border, and it's going to be up to local level infrastructures that we've built, that our generation and our communities have built. It's going to be up to that infrastructure to basically maybe not save, but help the people survive and thrive within it. Because if you're not, we rely so much on these centralized processes that are on the national level, but they're just not able to maintain themselves on the long term. And that's a historical thing. It's always this flux between the locality and the centrality. And right now, I see a shift from the centrality to the locality. So what needs to happen is we need to be building things locally. Not only these networks, not only networks of people nationally or even globally. Those are very good and very needed to spread not only information but resources. But ultimately, everything is local. Every problem is local, and every solution relies on local people to solve it.
Okay.
So what needs to be happening is that local people need to be forming communities, and they need to be, to the best of their ability, training to actualize their full potential. And this means that, getting people into local levels of politics, getting people into important businesses that are local. So that way, when something does happen and decisions have to be made, you can trust that your community is going to be able to make those decisions on your behalf. It's not democratic. You're not electing these people per se. It's possible that, politically true, but they're going to be acting on your behalf because you're a part of that community. And so to me, and I wrote an essay for the Firstness Journal about this in regards to the Hyksos in the Second Intermediate period, but it's only from these localities that have actualized their autonomous bureaucracies that any semblance of reconquest can come. It's not going. You can't do this. You can't do this on a national scale necessarily. It's going to be confederations of localities that are all on the same page, that are all ready for this moment. And I'm hoping that this book, to whatever extent it can, helps people get on the same page about what needs to happen and how to build things like that.
So many times throughout the whole history of American Zarathustra, I've talked about this concept of what I call patriot conventions, and I had the idea of calling it a heritage convention. And it was basically, Nullis is probably sleeping listening to this because how many times has he heard it? But the idea is to start essentially something like I used to work at Comic Cons, and I'm thinking, why don't we have a convention for patriots? And the word patriot generally, being right wing, essentially, right? There's no patriots on the left. And then within that, having, of course, vendors and events. And at first I thought about having local Republicans come and speak at it. And then I realized the Republican Party is not very strong, and then we got to put it in the hands of the people and build it grassroots. And so I've had all kinds of interest. I've had people shut me down. I've had Republican politicians locally go out of their way to shut me down on that idea, which says everything. I'm like, oh, okay, I see. So I see who, you're not on our side, And
Basically,
so, but the question I'm coming to here is, how do you sell this idea to the American public, who is too engaged in football and beer and potato chips to kind of care, or they have a million sort of packaged opinions from Fox or CNN or whatever, that's, they're always going to walk around this, because anything to do with personal responsibility for saving Western civilization, that's like, that's like garlic to a vampire for them, or, you get my point.
yeah, I do. And so I think there's a twofold answer. On the one hand, we do need to be getting as many people on board as possible, but I don't think it's a numbers thing. But to get people on board, I think intellectually we've been making the arguments, and we've been winning every time where there's an open playing field, which is why they have to censor us so much. Excuse me. But on the other hand, we're not winning on the emotional front, and that's where like art and entertainment comes from. And if we can start making things on that front, there's going to be way more opportunity to get people on board. But to me, that's very important, and we should be looking at every avenue of victory. There's not one avenue that's going to secure us victory. Every avenue should be looked at. Let a million blossoms bloom. But to me, I believe that we also need to be looking at making sure we don't have to win over everybody. We don't even have to win over all white people. We don't even have to win over 51% of white people. We need to win over 5 to 10% of the population, which is the people with the energy. We need to be winning over the people who are going to become the priest class in the society to come. And I just say priest class as someone who's, from like someone who's going to be determining the laws, someone who's going to be justifying the system. And they're seen as like the intellectual hub of the society. We need to be winning over those people who are going to be the burgeoning priest class for the new society, because they're going to be the people who are going to have the energy. And they're going to be the people who are able to justify and actualize any sort of military class whenever that becomes necessary. If it does, I mean, there's any number of things that can happen. But to me, you don't have to win over everyone. You just need to win over these people who are going to be able to acquire or already have capital, intellectual practice, and energy, because that's how our enemy has won against us during this whole thing since the 19 whenevers, but especially in the 1960s. That's how they won, was dedicated zealots operating locally and slowly over time shifting things to their side.
So first thing, where can I get an application for the priest class? I want to apply. Yeah,
well, that's a great part. It's not democratic. There's no applications. It has to be inducted. You have to be inducted. So it's a very rigid hierarchy with a central core, but you'll probably never see it.
What would I have to do to earn that?
I would say that. So hold on, let me flip through this book. Okay, give me 1 second, because to me,
I'm thinking of the kung fu guy that like picks up the cauldron with this and burns the dragon and the tiger into his arms in the TV show. Sorry.
No montages here, Donald.
It's not a Buddhist show, Donald. Come on. So this is powerful stuff, and I like how it's essentially adding on to the idea that I had, because obviously I would want to bring in like Antelope Press and Imperium Press and White People's Press to these conventions, and have tables, have workshops where people can teach homesteading, people can teach gun safety, people can teach self-defense, whatever, safety for natural disasters, become autonomous, to really become autonomous. I don't, the word militia is a real red flag,
right.
But I mean, it is in the Constitution, it's like, I have a ready militia. There's absolutely nothing unlawful about it. I mean, we all know, of course, that, we're not supposed to talk about that. But anyway, Hand the mic to Nullis here. What are your comments?
Well, this is very interesting. First of all, I see this mostly work in the United States, but not necessarily only the United States. So in Europe, it's somewhat more complex or layered, if you will. There are well-established national identities throughout Europe, at least traditionally. In many countries, especially in Western Europe, this identity has been wavering over the last few decades. And of course, some people make the argument that the smaller tribal identities have given way to these national identities, like in France or in Germany, what have you. With all of that said, I think that in many parts of Europe, and I can't say that this would be a blanket statement for all parts of Europe, but in many parts of Europe, you would have to think nationally. You would have to think in terms of each country as their collective identity. And the goal for each of these European countries would be for them to go back to their roots and rediscover their history, if you will, and forge ahead to recontextualize their nations. Now, this is an ongoing struggle that's going on in the European Union, because the struggle right now in the European Union is it a United States of Europe, or is it a national states, a union of national states in Europe, right? And so this is the higher level political fight that's going on. That's not to say that the guys that are fighting for or most of the guys fighting for this states of unified states of Europe, as opposed to or nations of Europe concept, are necessarily our guys. So that's where we then have to drill down on the national level, and then that's where what you're saying, Jim, is very relevant. So I can give a good example to this. In Hungary, in the mid 90s, I would say around then, that's when you started seeing a rebirth of what was called the national side, the nationalist side, if you will. And this usually consisted of about maybe 5 to 10% of the population, always. And it was always kind of this group that were mostly very, I wouldn't say zealous, but very strongly patriotic, strongly nationalist. And it was always around that 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10% in some cases, consistently. And so what happened over the decades was that you had various nationalist movements starting to organize locally. They started to organize events. They started to organize youth events, various lectures, and they went around the country. And so this movement grew over time, but that 5 to 10% never really changed. It just sort of reinforced the commitment of the people that already believed in it anyway, right? And so now, but now it's reaching a point where this national side influences the greater polity. And what it does by that is you have earlier you had Jobbik, which betrayed their and I don't want to get too much into Hungarian politics, but I do want to explain why this is important. So you did have you had a political party in the 90s that sort of floundered but represented this interest. And then you had Jobbik in the early 2000s to maybe around the early 2010s, and then they betrayed their base, and now you still have this Mihazánk, this new movement that just formed as a result of Jobbik betraying their base, and they made it into parliament during these elections. Now they're not a large party, but the point I'm trying to make is that this 5% is always there. This 5% is always fighting for that, and it gets to a point where the larger party, so this conservative kind of civic nationalist or Civnat Fidesz party, this like center-right party, has to take elements from the right, from the nationalist side, in order to remain relevant. So even though the right isn't in control, they are influencing policy. So because Fidesz knows that if they don't follow these policies, then the right will grow and grow and then outgrow the center right. And I think that when we're looking at it this way, it's kind of that I kind of want to give this as a positive message to everyone that we can do this on a national level, but it's a lot of work. It takes maybe many years, but the foundation of all of this has to be what you're saying, Jim, is that you have to start from scratch. You have to rediscover yourself. You have to work locally, and you have to really network with people that you know in real life. You have to meet people in real life, and you have to kind of reconstitute the concept of family as well. You have to move beyond the nuclear family. You have to accept
Yes.
that larger community as your family, and that also means that you're taking responsibility for each other in a very, very important way and intimate way in many ways. So this is just a kind of a comparison I wanted to give to what you're saying, and I think that in Europe it's somewhat different. But if there's any Europeans that are in the chat, please comment on this, because I think that each European country has also a different experience when it comes to these questions. Maybe in France it's different than in Germany or in Hungary or in Poland or what have you, or in Italy. So each country has a different experience. But I believe that you see the core of all of these movements all over Europe. It's not just Hungary. I think that you see this everywhere. So it's up to us. And of course, we're fighting an uphill battle. I do want to qualify that. We're fighting an uphill battle because any kind of nationalist movement that asserts itself anywhere, whether that's in Europe or the United States or anywhere in the white world, if you will, they're always facing attacks. They're always facing some kind of censorship. They're always facing some kind of deplatforming or what have you. In some cases, sadly, they might even face more serious legal issues. So we have to understand this and that's where the zealous person has to emerge, to understand that this is a struggle and sacrifices will have to be made. And in order to do that, in order to be able to withstand these sacrifices, the first step I would suggest to everyone, and again, Jim, please don't. I'm curious to see what you think about what I'm saying. The first step that I always think that people need to do is to take a long look in the mirror and look at themselves first and ask, am I able to do this? Am I ready for this commitment? Because it is a huge commitment and it's not an easy path.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that it is. It's not, and it's not only something that is short-term commitment, because I believe that with the current snowballing of everything, decisions that we make now may be uncovered during when the commissars start coming. If you make a decision about that, it is going to be long term, whether or not you make it long term. So it's a very deep commitment to our people.
Right.
But along with what you said, I think that one of the big differences between the U.S. and Europe is that many European nations have a parliamentary system which allows for these other far right parties to influence or assert themselves, even like you said, gain a seat in parliament, which would be just entirely unthinkable in the U.S. except at the local level,
Yes.
But that's probably one of the big differences, and that's one of the reasons that I think that people in the U.S. May be a little bit more disheartened, is because they don't have an open or an advertised outlet for this sort of anger or depression that they have no, especially politically. They have
Right.
Joe Biden or Donald Trump. That's it.
Right.
And there's really no
Coke or Pepsi, right?
Yes.
But I should also add, though, that in some European countries, it's nearly impossible for nationalist movements to assert themselves, because the powers that be conveniently made sure that they can constitutionally bar people from even getting remotely close to a seat in parliament. So sadly, it's not the case in every country in Europe, but I think it's not impossible. But again, it's an uphill battle. It's a struggle. It's something that we have to be very cognizant of.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I guess what comes to mind is the actual boots on the ground approach. So, here you've laid out the reasoning behind this new thinking, and then pointed the direction to the future. So what it would require is for, say, people like myself, or wherever we are, people in the chat, to start a little group wherever they are, and I don't know if my Patriot Con could maybe be a way in which they could form these types of groups. You could at least attract people to these ideas, or maybe there's some kind of situation where you could sort of construct a micro version of this system, even in like a game form or something, and show people this is how this would work. You play this role, I play that role, and here's a problem. Okay, the roads need being fixed, or we're being flooded with migrants, or or whatever. That we have a fentanyl problem. Blah blah blah. All these various things, and again, I'm always about taking ideas into reality. So I'm wondering if we three can chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do like the idea of your convention. I think that's a solid idea, especially trying to expose normal people, or quote unquote normal people, to the ideas that are necessary to get them into our sphere of things. But I think another way that you could probably achieve that is to more or less hijack or subvert or infiltrate pre-existing ones. Maybe not national ones, but things, like every town has like a whatever founding day or whatever heritage day or whatever heritage society already set up most of the time. Especially, or I can only speak for the US, but most towns, no matter how small, have some sort of thing that is not explicitly white, but the only people who are going to show up are going to be white people.
Obviously, yeah.
And so you can start to bend, as and a lot of the times these are things that are, or associations or organizations that are predominantly administered by boomers or other, not our generation uh, age set. So it's very invigorating for the pre-existing members to see a younger person show interest in what they do, and I think that especially someone with your or Nellis's aptitude, not only for political discussion but also artistic expression, would be very, very welcome to these sort of groups. And even if not, I think that the age and the energy that we would bring to a group like that would be incredibly, incredibly welcome, to the point that they may even turn a blind eye when you start trying to shift things towards what you want. You start having these folk day celebrations with heritage. You bring in speakers who are, our speakers, or you start showcasing things that are our things. And that would signal to people who are already aware in your locality that, hey, someone's on board. And at the very least, you get to make some social connections outside of the internet, which is a big deal for our sphere. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and business connections as well. That's because people are always down for selling stuff and buying stuff, and especially in like a family-friendly environment. So I feel that this is my subjective take. So I there's no way to know this for sure, but I wanted to say that I do feel that our sphere has grown and grown and has more influence. Granted, obviously we're still where we are and we're still fighting the evil enemy that we're fighting. But I sense this both online and IRL, in boomers and younger people like high school kids and stuff. Some of them are off the charts based, like incredibly based. Like my son's friends, he wouldn't believe it, so I'm like, there is hope, and I just sort of feel like reaching out though to the older people who are already in charge of various institutions and finding a way to talk to them. Because like I said, when I presented this Patriot Convention concept in the document that I sent to all the local politicians, I had a section saying that we, in light of, because this was during the Second Amendment gun rights thing, Virginia, that was a couple of years ago. That was like the big hot topic. I said, why are we just defending the Second Amendment? Why not the whole Constitution? We need to have a constitutional convention per se, right? So that being the case, I want to start off by saying a part of this Patriot Convention is recognizing publicly that no other foreign law is allowed in America. Therefore, Noahide law and Sharia law are outlawed and have no place, and we're going to stand up and say it, and the Republicans like, wet their pants. They're like, no way, get out of here. You're, I don't want to be, I can't go against the Muslims and the Jews. Oh my God, I'll be dead, and,
It's such a simple thing to say, though, is that, like what you're suggesting is so simple to say. It's
and lawful.
Yes.
That's the key. And lawful. Yeah. And, it's just this extremely low IQ, childish mentality of let's just go one day at a time and let's not look at history. Let's not acknowledge the changes around us. Americans are not passports. We're a people. We're the heritage people. We're the settlers. We're the descendants of these settlers. And, it's not strictly racial, but there's something to hold on to there. And I feel like that is the spirit. That is, in a sense, a spiritual aspect of, say, again, I can only speak for America, so I'm not going to go, I'll let Nulla speak for Europeans. But you're getting where I'm going with this, is that they have to have this like inner awakening. And one of the ways in which I thought about recently, an idea I came up with of white pilling people to white identity politics, is proposing a plan to get rid of all the Polish people in America. and using all the techniques of the left, the Marxists, the Democrats, every single policy they are doing that are anti-white, but framing it within, we got to get rid of the Poles. We need to get them out of America by any means possible. People would lose their minds. I would get attacked on all sides. But then if I said, okay, then why, okay, maybe Irish then. Let's do this to the Irish. What are you talking about? Okay, the Italians. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, why don't you recognize that you're white? Why do you not? Oh, now I get it. Aha, the big aha moment. Oh, you see, like separating ourselves into these ethnicities and seeing through those lenses, I think, and as an American, I know I'm not speaking for Europe, is a huge weakness. Like whites are whites, and it's a different paradigm in America, right? So this is my position. I think it's debatable. I certainly would like to hear your thoughts. And Jim, I'm actually interested if there is a racial dimension to your new ideas in your book.
Well, there absolutely is. But let me say briefly beforehand, I would be totally on board, unironically, with the whole Polish thing. One of the groomsmen at my wedding was Polish, and so I can attest that they are not people who we want in this country.
Oh, come on. No, I mean, I'm kidding. I love Polish people. But I think they're a great example because look at how incredibly nationalist they are. Poland is awesome. Poland is one of the most based countries, that's like openly anti-LGBT and openly against, immigration from blah, 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 all these things. I feel kind of leading the way. They're super, they have this very powerful sense of religious identity. You see where I'm going? So yes. Isolating them specifically, it triggers, I hope that it triggers a certain kind of like Christian nationalism, that because I feel like populism is going to be important for us to change. And we're going to have to somehow bring this idea into the Christian culture.
If I could just throw in a little bit of, coming from an ethnic community here in the U.S., I mean, knowing these things very well, yes. I would say that this is it's one of those questions that's not easily answered, right? So somebody who has a strong Italian, Irish, German, Polish, Hungarian, any kind of identity, but they're Americans and grew up in the United States, right? They need to understand that if there's an attack on one, it's an attack on all of us,
right?
And so the same has to apply, in Europe as well. But Europe, it gets very complicated because there's centuries of history and centuries of conflict among Europeans, and so a lot of that has to be resolved, hopefully peacefully. And there are examples and paths that can show that it is possible. but the respect has to be a mutual respect. So if one side says, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm on board. I want to do this," and then the other guy comes in and then he throws some grievance in from what have you, then okay, let's talk about it. But then if it turns into a disrespect fest or an argument or what have you, then it's counterproductive, right? So it's not an easy thing. I'm not going to say it's easy, but let's just refocus on the United States. So what I would say is that there are millions of these organizations, local organizations, where the clubs or I don't know, veterans associations,
Knights of
or
Columbus,
Knights of Columbus, a number of these that people can join and they would be welcome. They want to see young people join. So I think that would be an excellent first step for everyone to get involved in their local community, and they don't have to go into long tirades about philosophy or political theory or any of these things. Just do the work, show that you're a valuable part of the community, and gradually you influence the people. You kind of bring them over to your side. You kind of give them, through one-on-one conversations or small conversations, or you bring in a lecturer that has kind of an approach that is appealing to the normie but is still based. You have all of these different ways to approach it, and so you can do that. And I think that when it comes to all of these various ethnic communities, these European ethnic communities in the United States, you should also do it there. But over there, what you really need to do is you need to kind of bring in that idea that, an attack against one is an attack against all, and that kind of thing. So I think that for the United States, it could work. In Europe, it's somewhat more complicated, but it's necessary. And of course, then the big question is, how much time do we have to do all of this, right? So everything is accelerating at such a pace that I don't know. Right. And then you also have the demographic disaster looming. I mean, in the next 10, 15 years, it's going to be a horrific landscape demographically in many parts of Europe and the United States.
It already is.
Yeah. I mean, but it's really going to be bad.
No, I know. Like third world bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to
Camp of the Saints.
Yeah, Camp of the Saints. Yeah. And so I'm just saying that we do have to work locally, but there is a certain ticking clock involved in this as well.
Right. We definitely don't have the time. You're absolutely right. We don't have the time frame that our enemy had 2 generations ago. But the interesting thing with the model that I'm trying to operate off of is that at the very least, if you ascribe to it, or if you at least understand it and take action on it, at the very least, you're going to get probably some friends. You're at least going to find people who trust you. And that's going to be so important. In real life, people who trust you, who live near you, is going to be so important moving forward, especially as inflation climbs, as supply chains start to diminish, as finding jobs is going to be more difficult due to automation. Automation, excuse me. The price of oil, everything. It's going to be so important. So even if they don't fully have our views, even if the time scale that we're operating on is apocalyptic, operating off of this model is, to me, crucial, because it allows so many other avenues. If you're operating solely by your own will or by some sort of ethereally national scope, then you will be marooned when things come to a head. But as long as you know people locally, even if they're tied to a national thing, or even if like the Republican Party, let's say you go to a Republican Party meetup, you hate everyone except like 2 guys, and y'all just talk and hang out and you like each other. Well, that's going to be more important than posting a manifesto online or anything like that. It's going to be more important than just about anything you can do, because you're going to have that trust, which you're going to, in my opinion, have to actualize in the coming decades. So the sooner that you get started, the better. But Donald, to answer your question, you said a second ago about the racial aspect to the book. I want to answer that a little briefly.
Okay.
Because there is a very definite racial aspect to the book, but I don't really talk that much about race until like the mid part or the midsection of the second part, because I want it to be accessible to people, and I don't want to just come out the door, kick the door open talking about
Yeah.
XYZ.
Yeah.
But I definitely wanted to like filter feed people into this idea, and then slowly it's like, oh, okay, well I bought into everything else that he said before this, so
Mhm.
this makes sense. And then you get a little bit deeper, okay, that makes sense. So and again, it's explicitly for, as you can see on the back cover, it's explicitly for our people's interests.
Mhm.
And the society that I envision to come is going to be explicitly for and by our people.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of thoughts come to mind about it. There's going to be a lot of people that are kind of caught in the crossfire, but the point I wanted to get to though is how you're framing the racial topic only shows the depth and seriousness and truth of it. That people are so profoundly brainwashed to be anti-white. You have this weird mentality. Half of it being fear of attack or losing their job or family friends, and the other half being literally cut off from their ancestry, their history, family. I mean, the modernity is a train wreck. And so to get into that golden core where the true light resides, and saying, this is who we are, and it's a great thing, and it's a profound thing, and we need to start from that spiritual essence and then kind of explode outward. I think it's a tricky path to get in, but once you're able to kind of tap that, there's a giant kind of elevation, enlightenment that arrives
Yes.
to people. It really is a profoundly beautiful thing, and not evil at all, not hate based, blah 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 blah. And it's nothing what the left says that it is, and that's the whole thing. That all the left has is lies. All they have is obfuscation. All they have is twisted dialect. And when you see all of that all together, and you realize, man, you're just a shit show. You're just smoke and mirrors. You're a paper tiger. I am what I am. I'm becoming what I am. And then to have a whole giant community around you that's already there and saying, yeah, welcome home, brother or sister. That's a powerful thing. So that goes back to the arts, music, poetry, film, art, et cetera, fashion, anything that is celebrating Western kind is essential. So, but there's just so many components floating around in this here. It can get amorphous and philosophical and such, but
Right.
it's very much that we do have to kind of like structure out. Okay, how do we apply this now? What are your thoughts, Nellis?
Right.
I'll just give Nellis a moment.
Oh no, go ahead, Jim.
No, I insist.
Oh well, no, I'll let you go first.
Oh no.
After you.
This door is going to stay open. No,
the whole show into this like politeness. We're just too white, folks. Sorry, we're just too polite.
No, it's definitely something that is so deeply ingrained. It's said like racial subjects are so taboo. It's beyond parody.
Yeah.
And to be able to talk openly about it is very powerful because it is so taboo. And to me, one of the cool things in this book is about realizing the truth. And a lot of the times that truth is very ugly, but it is ultimately what's real. And there is a beauty to our people too. There is a beauty that must be maintained. It must be promulgated. And it must be acknowledged first and foremost. And if someone is not willing to do that, or if someone is unable to do that, it needs to be brought out. It needs to be understood why, so that way we can combat it in other people too.
Yeah.
So it is like what you're saying. It is a multifaceted subject, but to me, once you come into this, it's a very simple thing. It's an identity. It's ideas about ourselves, and it's just who we are. So bringing people into that awareness is critical, and it is a main theme of the book as well.
Okay, so here's a good thing then, and tying this all together with the arts. I was out at some bars recently, and just like rock and roll and just all white people, and like working class white people, and they're having the time of their lives, and they're loud and ruckus, and everybody's hugging each other, and we're drinking and have blah, 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 ha ha ha. It's just a good old time, us being us. You see, like we're not in some kind of like degenerate trap music type setting where we have to like shut down and be careful and look over our shoulder and stuff. And
Yeah,
they're
you're not being watched by someone else.
or afraid that there's a certain demographic in the location here, and we don't know where this is going or whatnot, feeling threatened, etc. But where I'm going with this is to have some kind of regular events in which we come together and we're us. So like the Patriot Convention, once again, a heritage convention, I think would be a better term, because Patriots kind of too Republican at this point, and whereas heritage is more us, that's more people related. You see where I'm going? And then, to be allowed to talk about our European heritage, white demographic replacement, et cetera, in some kind of you see where I'm going? So it's like, I'm trying to feel this out, like how well would that work, or what would be the pitfalls to it, et cetera.
No, I think it's essential. One of the things that we have to wrap our minds around is that we need to be giving people permission to have
Yes.
these ideas.
Precisely.
And something like that would definitely give them permission. The only pitfall I could think of is that it has to be, you have to meet people on their own terms, which is why one of the things that I was stressing was to join pre-existing organizations, because if you meet people on their own terms, you are able to better gain. Well, you're able to better gain their trust, because they don't feel like the possibility of them taking part in some sort of cult thing. And I would understand. I understand that it wouldn't be framed like that, and it wouldn't be. But there's always that possibility of bringing someone in from the outside, is that they do feel it's some sort of cult, which it's not. But by joining another organization that's pre-existing, I think that you prevent a lot of that, which could be, that's just a potential pitfall.
So one of my methods for allowing an environment in which we can openly celebrate our ethnic identity is to, at the Patriot Conventions, to have, like, always offer free booths for the local, Italian association, Polish association, Irish association, Greek association, all of these, because where I live, you've got those little pockets. They're like little VFWs, but the Italian club, and
Right.
all the Goombas go over there and have their cigars and their blah blah blah. I say it because I love you. Come on, get out of here. Don't get me in trouble. And so and then imagine all of them in one place, plus all of the local history history museums, all in one place. And so it just take a second, and people would stop and go, wow, this is like a huge European American gathering. Yeah, and that's the actual identity of it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do. I do get that. I think it would be beautiful. I think it would be very good at like making networks and connections between these different groups that are all more or less operating for the same function.
And
But
like Nola said, an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. That could be a good way to build that cultural identity community.
you need that mafia mindset, 100%. That's basically what I'm talking about, forming is little local mafias who are able to provide for their members and provide for their people and the community of trust.
I would say that's probably where and how most mafias were born, and why they exist at all in some regard. In China, that's extremely the case. With like totalitarian governments throughout history, and families having to, the clan having to be its own mafia in order to kind of it's weird how governments almost create mafias. And of course, our government is infiltrated with the leftist mafia now.
Right. Yes.
No,
If,
Yes.
yeah, if I can just add to all of this, this is great stuff. I was just thinking of the idea of the nuclear family and the individual. So, in a sense, one could argue that the nuclear family is the individualism of the tribe. You're separating your immediate family from everyone else. And if we can somehow bridge that gap, that you belong to a greater family. So
Yeah.
whether that greater family is in your local community, which is the natural way of doing it, which would be the easiest way for people to have a better understanding of that this village, this town, this neighborhood, that we all are responsible for each other, that we're a greater family. I think that's an important step in bringing people closer to the understanding that they belong to a larger community, that they belong to a larger ethnicity, that they belong to a larger race, that they have this greater understanding of self. Because the problem with the nuclear family, as with the individualism, is that you retreat into yourself, or you retreat into your family for support, guidance, advice, mentoring, and everything else. And if you can expand that to this greater community, and I think that what Jim is saying, by volunteering at existing institutions, I think that's an excellent idea. I think that is exactly the way to do it.
Right.
Because then what you're doing is, you're really, even if you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about theories, you don't talk about ideologies, you focus purely on identity, and you just focus on people, giving them a better understanding of the larger community. And it used to be that way. It used to be that way here in the United States. It used to be that way in Europe. You had this idea of the local community, of the local family. If you belong to, if you grew, I mean, okay, nowadays, and this is modernity and technology and everything else kicking in, where families, everyone's moving left and right. So maybe we have to learn how to adjust this sense of greater family in this world that we're living in. So we have to maybe readjust this concept a little better. So I'm just throwing some ideas out on this. I don't have any answers to it, but I think that the solution is somewhere in somehow naturally, or the solution is found somewhere in giving people an opportunity to understand this natural connection they have with one another on a greater level, outside of the individual, outside of the immediate family.
Beautifully said. Yeah. I was just envisioning, huge dinner tables at these patriot conventions, and everybody eating together. Because what's more family than eating together, and somebody can lead a prayer, and and then let the merriment begin.
Well, maybe just for the audience's sake, just to say, I grew up in one of these kinds of communities where it was an extended ethnic community. We didn't live in the same neighborhoods. Everyone lived in different parts of the city, and we met in one location. We grew up together since childhood, and to this day, my closest friends are from this community, even now. And so, does that mean that everyone in this community remained? No, you had a lot of people that moved away, but you try to keep in touch with them. But you see, the problem with that is, and this is where I think the bigger problem is, when people start moving away, going somewhere else, then these ties loosen, right? And so I think the big challenge for us in general is to find a way to reconnect those ties regardless of distance, if that makes any sense.
Or, I strongly agree with you, but let me also say, maybe built into Jim's vision here is to solve the problem of making it so people don't have to move away, that the economy is strong enough, whatever the structures are strong enough locally. There's people that want to move because they just have the adventurous spirit, and they want to, and that there's people that want to move because they buy into the BS that, like, you have to move to California because that's where all the hip cats are, or something like that.
Right.
But make it so that everybody feels like, I don't have to leave my network. That's the whole point of it, is your family and your friends are a network, and you depend on that network for survival.
Right.
Modernity shatters that, and encourages us to all go into 10 different directions. I was lucky to be with my mom in her last years, and everybody should have that sense of like, I have a duty to my family, and I have a duty to my community, because my community is my extended family.
Exactly.
Right. So like that would be a really, really good political thing. I don't know what to call this, like a sort of a strategy to say, bring this into politics. We've solved the problem of X, so that people don't have to move away. Where I live, there's a really, really strong sense of local pride. And there was a period of time, I'd say in the 90s, where everyone was moving out, and our population was declining. And then like in the 2000s, there was swarming home, and everybody was, there's no place like home. Like where I live, we have A, B, C, D, F, G, and plus it's my family and my people I grew up with. That's who you are, right? I mean, you can reinvent yourself in another state or a country even, but it's something about that family network, the friend network. Yeah.
Just sorry to interrupt, but like again, being someone who grew up in a diaspora in a sense, right? Yeah, what you can also say is that if these networks, theoretically, if you had hundreds of these networks throughout the United States, for example, and let's say you lived in Georgia and you got a job up in Minnesota, for example,
Yeah.
Right.
and you had to move, then since you have these networks and all these small communities all over the place that have similar values, similar goals, similar ideas, then if you go to Florida, then you immediately can tie into that community, because it's a very similar to what you had before. So, and I hate to put it this way, but in many ways, the whites, primarily here in the United States, they have to look at this, because the U.S. is such a vast country. We have to kind of look at this as it's like kind of a diasporic community, if you will, where you'll have pockets of these communities all over the country. So let's say you get a job in California. Well, there's a group there in San Diego, and they meet, every so often. They have their regular get-togethers. They, hang out with each other, families, everyone's close. And, you can tie into that group, and then you can become a part of that group. And the transition is a lot more natural if it's networked, if it's kind of, and I'm not saying don't focus on politics. I'm not saying that we shouldn't focus on immediate concerns. But I think that the bigger issue is for people to find a home. The bigger issue is for people to find a place where they belong. And when you say that you have a place that you belong, that is more of a cultural, that's an identity issue. That's a natural identity issue, not an artificial identity. You make it your natural, you make it your family. And so it's almost like, if you move to California, you're visiting cousins, and then you become, then you're living around your cousins in California. And so that's the mentality that we should be really forging, is this extended families, these communities that, or let's say, for example, I live in a bad community and I don't have it where I live. And then some friend of mine will say, hey, there's something here in Pennsylvania, or there's something in Ohio, or something in Idaho, whatever. And why don't you try to come out here? And then I'll start looking. Let me see if maybe I can help you get a job out here. Why don't you come out here?
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're not in that kind of a community, then you can also go into these communities. And again, saying that, oh, we're going to all move into one town, that's nonsense. That's a utopia. But it's more realistic saying that, hey, there's a group of 20 families in Idaho. There's a group of 15 families in Pennsylvania, for example. You want to get out of the rat race. You want to get out of that insanity that you live in, that hellscape you live in. Then, you know what? Let's try to help you do that. And so that, to me, would go on a one-on-one basis. It's not really something that would have to be overly organized, because that stuff happens naturally once these communities start developing.
So Mark Collette actually talked about this on one of his shows in the last couple months. And it hurts to say this, but he's essentially saying whites, or whites in general need to kind of act like Muslims in the sense that that's exactly what they do. You know, they can go anywhere in the world, wherever there's a Muslim community, and zoop and fit right in, and their needs are taken care of. You know,
They have a job lined up.
yeah, they've got 5 kids from, you know, or from 5 wives or something, you know, and they're busy overpopulating and doing all their illegal actions and working underhandedly with the Democratic Party to get funding to do this and doing kickbacks. And there's this whole mafia type network going on, religio mafia, you know, and we wouldn't be doing those illegal things, but we would be behaving in such a way because as much as it's pure agony to say this, our worlds are kind of becoming like that. And you know, they're kind of like we're becoming islands in a sense in an ocean of immigrants. And I don't like that at all. I reject that wholeheartedly. But at the same time, I'm a fool to not start getting ready for it. You know, so it's a painful reality. But go ahead.
But here's the silver lining: is that this situation that we face, as bad and as dire as it is, the way that I view it is like a moral or an ethical Black Death, where instead of it being a biological thing or a viral thing, whatever, it's all about morality. The population, even of our people, who are not able to cope with what's going on, they're not able to plan accordingly, they're not able to react accordingly, they're not even able to understand what's going on.
Right.
They're not going to make it past this liminal event that we're passing through right now. But people like us, if we're able to build that infrastructure, we will be able to survive this moral Black Death, and we'll be able to come out on the other side stronger because we will have built these institutions that have gained the individual members' trust. And once we have like this communal network of trust, that to me is the most vital thing. And my main goal, I want to win.
Yeah,
I want to win. I don't. The means to me are important. The means are important because some means exclude certain ends, and the ends that I want do necessitate certain means. But ultimately, I want to win, and whatever method we need to do to achieve that victory is what we need to do. If that's taking subsidies from the government, if that's doing whatever we have to do it to win. I just believe that this method that I delineate in the book about localities offering benefits to their members and the membership being based on trust because everyone knows each other locally, that to me is the best way to achieve that, because ultimately every issue that those people are going to face is going to be affecting them locally. Yes, many people can be affected by the same thing on a national scale. I mean, look at something like Amazon. Amazon affects everyone.
Yeah.
But there's these local distributor Amazon warehouses that are the issue for the local people. And so, you do need a national solution. But to me, because of the template, no, it's not the right word. The frame that I'm operating off of, the historical example that I'm trying to base my future predictions off of, I do believe that locality is the solution. And like I said earlier, even if it's not, at the very least, you're going to be gaining some friends.
Yeah, I believe you're super correct about these things. It's more about all the logistics and mapping out everything that we need to do. I wanted to give the audience a chance to ask you questions. So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to post a question while we're talking, and it looks like a good question, I'll post it on the screen, and then you guys can get engaged with Jim and the topics that we're discussing. So there were many chapters that you just spoke about in the beginning of the show, and I'm wondering if you want to maybe go back into any of the previous chapters and if there's any unique takeaways or special points that you think are relevant or you'd like to expand on.
Sure. Yeah. Let me kind of flip through here, see what I find while everyone's
okay. Cue music. And now from a word from our sponsor. No, we don't have a sponsor. Why don't we?
If only,
Why
yeah.
don't we have a sponsor? We should have a sponsor. This is a good time to promote, say, Coach Certified. Coach Certified is an app that you should download to your phone that allows you to see what foods are kosher. And I forget what the word is. It's like Sharia certified. I don't know what that's called, but it allows you to know what products you're putting your money into, and you don't want to be funding policies that are anti-white. So kosher certified is a good thing. Whitepeoplepress.com is brilliant. I'm biased because I work with them. I've done a lot of work and continue to do various freelance work for them. But, White People's Quarterly is one of the most fantastic magazines out there. Of course, Antelope Hill, I think they're in the news a little bit recently. There was something to do with Tucker
Yeah.
Carlson. Do you know what that is, Jim?
Oh, so it looked like they were in the news because Bill Kristol or someone like that, some big shot on Twitter, wherever, was like, did you know that this publisher is posting discounts on a certain Austrian painter's birthday for books regarding that Austrian painter?
Oh,
And it was like, he got ratioed, and everyone in the comments was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that. Thank you. I'm going to be buying this book now. I appreciate it, sir."
So, I think it's hysterical when the left actually is marketing us. And I honestly think everything they do markets us. Like the weirder things get, like this whole thing with Disney and pedos and groomers and okay groomer, like the new memes. Normie Republicans are like, I can't take it anymore. Like this is I think we are inevitable. I'm talking like Thanos here. We are. I mean, we're gonna take back our people. So
I just wanted to add 2 comments. Well, Jim, are you still looking? Because I just wanted to add some comments.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I got a few things lined up, but you can go ahead, man. No worries.
So first of all, discourse is the first point I wanted to make. We might not dominate the discourse. We might not dominate the narrative. In fact, we're probably going to be, censored, deplatformed, or not ratio, but what's the word I'm looking for? Shadow banned. I think that's what the word they use. Yeah. So whatever methodology or tactic they use against us, they're going to try to employ. But we have to be consistent and always stay on message, because over time it does seep into the normie sphere. Over time, somebody on, and again, we're going to run the risk of them then, somebody in the center right or the conservative movement would take a cause like CRT is a good example, and then they might try to reformulate it so that it's a watered down version of it. But
that's very true.
But it's still in the discourse, and that's a good thing. So we have to take the wins wherever we can. But for us, the goal is always to say, okay, great job that you guys are doing this, but we want more. It's not enough. And so, but we don't have to virtue signal spur or whatever word people use. But what we have to do is just stay on our message and let people say, hey, CRT, this guy, whoever is talking about it, this politician is talking about it, Tucker is talking about it. But you know what? That's good that they're talking about it. Here, come over here. Let me explain this to you a little bit in more detail.
Yeah.
And so in a way, what we have to do is we have to feed off of, so they're feeding off of us by bringing it into a larger watered down version, and we have to feed off of them to bring people, the normies, or the average Joe, and kind of bring them over and say, pull them aside and say, look, yeah, these guys are saying it, but it's not entirely, it's a good thing that they're saying it. I support them for saying it, but come over here. Let me give you a little bit more detail on it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, 100%.
And so we have to take advantage of this and not get into kind of arguments over nonsense on it. Let them do their thing. I mean, we're not going to influence it either way. The only thing we can influence is to have these important, like, the term anti-white is now in the media. People are saying it. Politicians are saying it.
Yeah.
So we have to then pull people aside, that we know, and this is where Jim's ideas are really good, because if you're in a local community, then you pull your friend aside and you say, hey, you watched Tucker the other day? Yeah. You hear him say anti-white? Yeah. Oh man. Here, let me give you a little bit more information on it. and you're helping them. You're not really, it's not kind of a weird thing. You're just telling them, hey, I got some more info on it. You want to hear it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think little things like this go a long way. And then the other point I wanted to make was about elites, right? There's an argument out there that says, well, we really won't achieve anything until we have what they call, quote unquote, elite buy-in, right? And when we're talking about elites, we have to be very careful, right? So in this world that we're living in today, I don't see I would say that the vast majority of the so-called elites, and I use that term very loosely with them, it's more of a parasitic caste than a true elite in the traditional sense.
Sure.
Be it as it may,
we are the elite.
Well, yeah, but yes, we are. But be it as it may, these people, and I'm talking more about people who wield power, who wield influence, who have vast amounts of money. There will be people in that group who might start to think about things and might say, wait a second, this is not really in my interest to see what's going on out there. And so they will start to look for answers themselves. And so it's our responsibility to provide answers, but they're not going to buy into whatever it is that we're trying to sell, quote unquote, right? Unless we put something on the table. We have to work hard. They're not going to risk. I mean, imagine some guy that's worth, $300, $400, $500 million, or a few $1 billion even. I mean, I don't know many guys like this that would be, but just theoretically, right?
Right.
And let's say he's starting to think about it, right? And he goes, you know what? I might want to support these guys, but I'm not going to risk everything if the guys that I support are not willing to risk everything. So, if you go back in history, you'll see that there was always a moment in time where, it might have taken decades, but eventually the, members of the existing elite would buy into that new paradigm. But they only bought in after all the groundwork was done, all the, hard work was done by people on the grassroots level first, And so these are the 2 points I wanted to kind of make. So is elite buy-in important? Maybe it is, but I don't think it's necessary right now. We don't have to think about these things. We could think about it in a theoretical sense, but right now for the immediate future, I think that what Jim is proposing is a lot more effective than talking about theories about, which billionaire is going to back us, which is probably not going to happen anyway. But just, even theoretically,
I think we could get some millionaires, though. I don't, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, you have a lot, and you have a lot of people out there that are, have small businesses, maybe even a small factory or something. They generational wealth. There's a lot of people out there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think equally important on your point, Nellis, is that we should be trying to convert people from the elite, at whatever scale. Locally at best. There's always some family, 3 or 4 families in a town that are like they've been there forever and they do have that generational wealth and that pull. Yeah. But we need to be getting those people, but we also need to be getting our people into the elite,
right?
As much as possible. And I don't mean that politically necessarily. I just mean that, even like a managerial position, if you can get someone to become a manager at a company, and if you can get one of our guys to be like a manager at a company who's also like the diversity champion, that's a big win. That's a big win. Or even someone like a librarian who refuses to put certain books on display, or maybe even, after the shift throws them away and they're just gone from the library.
Yeah, good.
Something like that is very crucial. It's just someone who can make these decisions and who is aligned with us. They don't even necessarily have to know that they're aligned with us. They just know that they hate this for whatever reason.
I'd say straight out of the gate, everybody listening to this show should, email their local library and say, I want all these books stocked in the library. That I don't know that they can say no. Because that's normally how libraries work, is that you don't have X books, so and then of course they would all be like White People's Press, Antelope Hill, that kind of stuff.
Well, but you don't have to burn books, right? All you have to do is just put those in the back shelves, and then you put the ones that you want to promote in the front.
Exactly. It's our version of ban. It's our version of shadow banning. Like we have to use those tactics wherever we are able.
Yes,
We have to use those tactics. It doesn't matter. Like, again, I just want to win. I just want to win. And if we have to use those shadowy or like quote unquote non-honor tactics, then we have to do it because our enemy's doing it. If we can't compete with that, then we're going to lose.
Okay, you just hit one of the core, like in my opinion, the very, very essence of why we're losing is because we're lawful people. We're, moral people. Before, I mean, if you go back in time, we had homogenous societies and people followed the law. And yeah, there were, criminals here and there on the side. But now that we have all these non-whites in our civilizations, they don't follow our laws. They don't respect our laws. You're a chump if you're following the law. You're either hustling or being hustled. That's the law of their land. Go back to your land. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that all these normies are walking around like, gee, why is there so much violent crime from the Mexican community, or why is this and that happening, and blah blah blah, like you're so naive. You're so naive because you're living in this bubble where you thought that everyone was lawful, and so if you put in some, criminals in a lawful environment, they just hustle the environment. And the more that we sympathize with them and give them the big victim badge and all the bullshit that the left does, it's that we're protecting them. They're a protected class. So it's absolute suicide to think like this. But the bottom line is it's us. We cannot coexist with criminal cultures. We cannot. Okay, it doesn't work clearly, obviously. And when I was a school teacher, I worked with these cultures for years, and I know what it's all about. They hate America. They hate whites. Every single thing that they do is to try to hustle and use us, take our resources, abuse us. I could go on. That's a whole other show. But the problem is us living in this weird, naive bubble that the Constitution makes us equal, and being an American is just a passport or some insane thing. So if you're not fighting fire with fire, I think you're going to lose. And I'm a lawful person. I'm not advocating for unlawful activities, but I'm if somebody, if soldiers came into your town with guns, you can't say, hey, that's illegal. They're going to just shoot you down.
But
it's a real psychological indicator for the people on our side too, because it shows where our mindset is. And our mindset is, ideally in an ideal situation, in an ideal environment, our mindset is correct. Or these conservative mindsets are correct, where it's like, I'm going to play by the rules. Yes. Because I know that I can win. If it's an even playing field, I know I can win because I'm smarter, I'm stronger, I'm more adept at communicating my points. I know I can win. But it's that same mindset where it's an unequal playing field that you lose. And they have set the playing field since, the 1940s, 1965, whatever. They've been setting this playing field to benefit their side. So we have to start making that shift to our way of thinking. And that doesn't mean make it level again, although we would win if it was. But what it means is making it to where they can't compete, because the only reason they're able to compete right now is because of this horribly ugly environment that they operate in.
Quote, equity, unquote,
Yes.
Okay, let's shift the rules to make them win. And that plays into some very deep, dark psychological and racial issues, because I tend to believe that the root and the fuel for anti-white racism is actually envy. It's the fact that we created these beautiful and exquisite and highly advanced civilizations, sciences, arts, et cetera, and other people didn't. And so they come and take ours. We open up all our universities. Come take all our resources and then become our competitors. That's a smart approach. So again, we can't live. We just have to recognize we're different. And the Constitution does not make us the same. And I'm speaking specifically to conservatives and Republicans here. The deracinated, even from a religious perspective, which that gets very, very complicated. And that's again another show. But this mentality of ignoring the fact that we're not the same. You don't put the fox in the chicken house. They're not the same. They don't, or like a chicken hawk in the chicken house, right? Like it doesn't matter how much they look like us or pretend to be like us or blah blah blah. It's I hate to say it, but like, and I've never really been hot on like separationist ideas or anything, but after so much data and so much experience, now it's just screaming everyone in the face. And so
Right.
that all seems to come back to that point about we need an environment where we can be honest and safe and open about who we are as a demographic, who's in control of our destiny. Certainly not the government. So I don't know. I'm kind of on my little soapbox here, but maybe Nellis can take the mic.
I actually wanted to go to another point and ask Jim, because I think the question of legacy is a crucial question. And so in your book, I don't know how you've addressed it, and I will read it. Oh, to the audience, buy the book.
I tried posting the link. It's too long to fit.
It worked. It worked, by
Did
the
it?
way.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it worked. So if you posted the link, then I clicked on it and it works.
Okay, great.
So the question for Jim would be is what would you consider the most important legacy we can hand future generations?
Well, I don't think it's our people, of course, but that's not just like a biological thing. I think handing them the keys to where they can make their own future is to me the goal. And I'm speaking as a father, is that if my daughter cannot live in a world where she can have a family of her own and they can have their own family, and this whole chain of existence can't continue to express itself, and like the beauty of existence cannot express itself in the way that I have experienced it, in the way that our ancestors have experienced it. And by that I am speaking more of a racial thing. I'm speaking more of our heritage. But if that cannot be experienced, then it's, to me, it's may not be all for nothing, but the goal, like my goal in life, is to realize that to the best of my ability. And I may never be able to see that, but
Yeah.
my goal would be to give them the ability to, if not make the society that can actualize our potential, then to give them the society that can actualize their potential, or the keys to where they can make that society. And I mean, this is kind of an aside. This is kind of obliquely on that point, but a lot of the stuff, a lot of the stuff that we have gone through in this society has in a lot of ways corrupted us. It's made us very pessimistic. We're aware of things that we shouldn't be aware of. Too much information, too much sin, I guess you'd say. But I don't know if it's kind of like the promised land in a lot of ways. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to see that, because I don't know if we should be let into that. We're part of this society, even though we're trying to get away from it, but we've been corrupted by this society mentally, spiritually, even. And this happened in Germany too. The NSDAP purged the SA because there were so many Freikorps elements of that, and afterwards they created the SS. But there were certain people who were integral to building the society who weren't allowed to be part of it, because they would ultimately corrupt it, because they were corrupted by the prior society. So, to whatever I'm saying that because to whatever degree, even if I am guilty of that, and the founders have to be undone, and by the founders I mean us, have to be undone for the society to promulgate properly, I'm willing to do that to make sure that my daughter and her family can have a family of their own, who's able to really enjoy existence the way that it was supposed to be, that our people are, bad term, but our people are programmed to enjoy existence in that way. That to me is the goal, and to fight ugliness, for them to not have to fight it and be so corrupted by it is the goal that I this can be done, and hopefully the legacy that they can have is to not have to go through the same things that we're having to go through now.
Yeah.
I think what this speaks to is that we, all of us now here today, we have to be the better version of ourselves that is the model to pass on as the legacy. We have to make it a lifestyle, as best we can with our resources, time, energy, etc., to, kind of be the ideal Westman, in whatever way that is. For somebody, it's going to be laying bricks and, hauling garbage or something. And for somebody else, it's writing a concerto or designing architecture. So whoever you are, be the best version of that within the scope of, we have a proud heritage. We have a proud people. What pops in my mind right now is the new movie that I think it's The Norseman that came out, and the liberal media is losing their minds over it because it's just, there's not a single non-white person in the film, which is like breaking natural law, and it's celebrating masculinity. And so like the right wing white supremacists are using this as a leverage to like gain power and influence of some kind. And it's so like openly obvious on its face that like everybody is supposed to celebrate their ethnic identity, history, culture, but whites, but when whites do it, it's dangerous, and anyway, be that man, or that woman, be dangerous, and I say that ironically, but what I mean is, be someone that people either look up to or maybe even fear, in the regard of like, don't mess with me. You cannot mess with me. I'm part of this network, this community, this heritage. And
Right.
God bless you. I wish you the best whoever you are, wherever you're from. Go back to your country, or whatever it is. But
And be the person our enemy hates.
Say
Which
that
is,
again?
I said, be the person that our enemy hates.
Precisely. And they've given you a rule book of like, don't be proud of yourself. Don't learn your history. Don't question the Holocaust. Don't A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all these various, little rules that you got to follow. Keep your head down. And here's your bowl of crap to eat every day, So when you slough that off, like, ha ha ha, I'm not going to be that mealy mouthed, spineless, non-racial entity that is just living to buy the next hip hop album, or see the next Marvel movie, as everyone says. You get where I'm going. We're all familiar with these ideas, but
if you really just break it down to its very core elements, what are we talking about? We're talking about essentially having an understanding of your history, know where you come from, understand the value of your family, understand the value of your greater family, of your community, be unapologetic about who you are,
unapologetic, yeah,
and stand with confidence. And it's often not easy. I'm not saying it is. And another one is, when you wake up in the morning, when you look in the mirror, don't look in the mirror with shame. Look in the mirror and feel that you are a part of something greater. Don't be caught up with your pride, obviously, because pride is also always the downfall. If you're overly proud, you kind of then don't notice, that's what happened to us, right? We were all of our civilizations we were overly proud. We had this success, centuries of success, and we didn't notice the subversion until it was too late. So we have to be aware of these things, but don't, the time for apology is over. The time for, if somebody says, oh, you're this, you're that, and you look at them, so what's your point? And so when you look at that, and as far as living your life, just be a good person, be moral, be ethical, show the community that you're living in that you're a valuable member of that community. I think all of these core elements, and a lot of people haven't. So now we have to take this and just sort of raise it up to a notch of awareness that you are a part of something greater than yourself. Your community is a part of something greater than itself. Your family is a part of something greater. And so when we elevate these things, then we start understanding our place in the world. We start understanding our civilizational destiny. And when we have a civilizational destiny, that's when these worms start shaking. That's when you have the problems. That's when they're going to be afraid. And my feeling is that they're already feeling the rumblings of it. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. History has always shown that these things happen, and it's going to happen again, and they know it's coming. And so for us, it's just a question of doing it the right way, and doing it in a way when we wake up in the morning, we can look at ourselves with a clear conscience. That's at least what I would say.
Well done. Yeah. So
That's
Tim, are there any
that's a
others?
critical point, is that knowing that you did everything good.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to ask you if there were any other points from the book or chapters that you wanted to kind of give some key points about.
Um, I
I know it's a
I
lot of
would just like to
content.
read. There's like a few little bit. There's one little bit here that I would like to read. It's towards the end of the book, and it's kind of.
Okay.
I think it would be a good closer. So a good summary
Excellent.
of a lot of the stuff we talked about.
Excellent.
So in the book, last chapter of the book, I say, our cause, us, will need veterans. We will need large families. We will need wealthy financiers. We will need grunts willing to be on the ground. We will need authors and artists. We will need civil servants. We will need farmers, welders, and electricians. We will need teachers and librarians. We will need those familiar with the people they live near, and in general, we need our people to be as successful and connected as possible. We need people with values and skills, not just knowledge and toys. Neither do we need dogmatists. We need human beings. We do not need to explicitly convert people, but simply thrive and build trust by aiding those around us.
Mhm.
Go meet people and understand them on their own terms to begin local consolidation. We cannot expect that the spiritual rejuvenation that is requisite for our survival will be any less painful, nor that the events we will endure uh, will be easily resolved. The Spanish Civil War, or 1920s and 1930s Germany, or the heartaches of pre-American revolutionary period should be studied closely.
Mm.
Things hung by a thread on the ability of aware people to endure trauma with their eyes fixed on their visions of a better world,
Mhm.
vigilant and steadfast in their goals.
Mm.
There will be absurdity and brutality that cannot be reasoned. The rules and expectations of the world our parents attempted to prepare us for will no
Yeah.
longer apply.
Right.
Neither compliance nor non-compliance as sole principles will be beneficial survival strategies. Ostentatiously exposing oneself will end in death. And this is the last paragraph. Not of the book, but just that I want to quote. Yet from these precarious circumstances there will emerge figures like kings of old, guided by a singular devotion regardless of perceived philosophical failings or hypocrisy. They will be victorious because they hold to honest principles, not dogma, and they do not despair. They will be victorious because they act decisively. They will have a kinetic energy, trained intelligence, physical prowess, and the will to use them both. They will use the canvas of a tattered flag to stitch their own creative vision onto.
Mm.
This is the way it has always been for the past 10,000 years, and we will be there, united with others after years of preparation.
Mm.
What an opportunity. That's it.
Wow. One thing that stood out to me was despair versus decisiveness. I mean, that's kind of quotable right there, or memeable. Despair versus decisiveness. So those are totally opposite trajectories. Despair, we know, right? We're living in it, right? But this sense of like decisiveness, having a sense that I have a vision, I have a methodology, I am deciding on this, I'm planning it out, I'm assembling my team, I'm getting out there and getting it done. There's no other choice. That's I often feel like the sort of white identitarian sphere is becoming a gatekeeper to itself, by having just tons and tons of talk shows and talking. And I'm like, well, that's good, that's important, but what are we doing in real life? What organizations exist? Like the American Kulaks is a great organization, for example. There's all kinds of organizations out there. Obviously, they're not, it's not all just talk shows, right? But I'm afraid of that. I feel like we're getting a little too comfortable just being online all the time, and I think from here on out, it's like you got to start building your network. You've got to start getting this kind of intra economy going, and et cetera, et cetera. So God bless our people, hail our people. I hope that we can, the leaders can emerge and stand up. The supporting actors, the left and right hand guys and girls that can get behind the leaders, they know their role and they're behind that. And I know that we've had this and that, disappointment over the several years, but we're perseverance. We have no choice but to win. We have no choice but to keep trying until we find something that works. And Jim has provided us a fabulous template for that. So I think this is a really, really great place to kind of wrap up the show. I just want to let Nullis have a word.
First of all, I just want to say thank you, Jim, for joining us today. And I really appreciate all the great ideas that you're presenting in your book. And to the audience, buy the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good subliminal, but I'm going to say, buy the book. Buy the book.
By the way, of course, it's the title's a big title, but I just want to pitch the book a tiny bit. I've got it at my Twitter. You've got Real Jim Bonner, right? Is your Twitter, Jim? Because the title's a bit much to research. So like if everybody could post that link to people in the chat, go ahead and click on it. You can copy paste it wherever you are, and let's help promote these ideas. Again, that right there is us being a movement. We're not a movement if we don't move. So get off your I'm trying to think of what the Polish word is for butt, but I don't know.
Just get off your ass and get
get off your ass and go do it. But you're hearing what I'm saying. Every single show I'm out there begging you guys to like get out there and do stuff, share the links. Every single one of us is a sort of a foot soldier, if that's the right term. I don't know. But yeah. Okay. So yeah. And Jim, any closing words?
Not really. I mean, I could go on another rant, but I do think it's probably time to cut it off. But shout out to Corey for buying the book and saying so in the chat. Much love. You have earned yourself a spot in the kingdom.
Awesome.
I appreciate that.
All right, and I'm going to be applying for the priest class too. So just so you know. All right. Well, fabulous having you on. Nullis, thank you so much. Your presence is just so important. And I'm really, really grateful for how you're bringing in the European view or lens on things. That's extremely critical. We're one people. We've got a pond in between us, but, all of these things matter. If you go after one of us, you go after all of us. So
exactly. God
bless Europe and God bless our homelands and our people and our cause. Jim, you're a hero. We're so grateful for the work that you do. And now it's on you, the audience. We're passing you the torch. Go forward and succeed. Remember, decisiveness wins over despair. All right. And on that note, I wish everybody a lovely evening. Nullis and I and a new friend of ours are going to be publishing a very, very special new kind of multimedia art project that we've been working on. We've become friends with this fabulous German composer, brilliant friend, lovely person. And it's going to be a big deal when it comes out. So it's profound. It's going to make a big splash. So stay tuned for that. I can't, unfortunately, give you a time when that project will be done, but it's really going to be a big thing to come and see. So anyway, God bless. Please share the link, and you guys have a wonderful rest of the evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.